into Seahawks Today by Chat Sports. Tyler Jones here with you. So glad to have you with us. Coming up on today's show, we have the latest Seattle Seahawks news and rumors. Now that they have Geno Smith locked up, who else could the Seahawks be in the market for? Could we see a return for Frank Clark to Seattle? Also, we will dive into Todd McShay's newest mock draft. We'll tell you who McShay has the Seahawks selecting with their 2 first-round picks, and break that down in just a few moments from right now. Before we do, folks, we are oh so close to 35,000 subscribers here on the channel. We had an incredible time with our live show reacting to the Geno Smith news on Monday, and we're going to go live again tomorrow as we do each and every Wednesday, folks. This is the place to be. If you love your Seattle Seahawks, what are you waiting for? You got to subscribe now for the latest happenings on your favorite team. We have you covered. We are your off-season headquarters here on Seahawks Today. So we're talking draft, trades, free agency, and more. Subscribe now for free. You'll be glad you did. YouTube.com/SeahawksTV to subscribe and be a part of our 35,000 subscribers here on the channel. So, Frank Clark, could we see him make a return to the Seattle Seahawks potentially? The Chiefs are expected to release Frank Clark, according to reports that came out on Monday. And we already know the Seahawks have a need when it comes to pass rushers and in particular at the defensive end position. So does it make sense for Seattle to consider a reunion with Frank Clark? Well, let's tell you more about Frank Clark. Second-round pick by the Seahawks back in 2015. Spent the first few years of his career in Seattle before ultimately he was traded back in 2019. And his time in Kansas City was pretty dang good. He was part of 2 Super Bowls. And I would argue that the Chiefs would not have won their first Super Bowl, probably not the second either, without Frank Clark on those teams, that he made that much of an impact, in particular in the postseason. Also was a 3-time Pro Bowler in that stretch with the Kansas City Chiefs as well, so things went pretty good for him there. What about the idea of him being a Seahawk again at this point in his career? Does that make sense for the Seahawks, something they should consider? More on that here in just a second before we do. Let me ask you, what say you? Do you want to see Frank Clark make a return to Seattle and rejoin the Seattle Seahawks? If you do, type Y for yes. If not, type in for no. Let me know what you're thinking. I'll tell you what I'm thinking on this here in just a second, but want to hear from you directly. Y for yes, in for no, if the Seahawks should bring Frank Clark back to the Seattle Seahawks. Chat Sports has launched a new YouTube channel focused just on the NFL Draft. This new channel has you covered with the latest mock drafts, analysis, and trade rumors, as well as an in-depth breakdown of draft needs for all 32 teams. Help us grow this new channel by subscribing. You won't find a better source on YouTube for all your NFL draft needs. More subscribers equals more videos. Go to youtube.com/chatNFL and subscribe. The link below or is also in the comments and the description of today's video. Again, that's youtube.com/chatNFL. Go subscribe today. Comment Seahawks in the latest video to show that you are a Seahawks fan. And the Seahawks have the best fans in the NFL. Now, here's what I look at when it comes to Frank Clark. Let's be honest here for a second. Frank Clark has been inconsistent throughout his career. It's been a roller coaster, right? He's been really good in the postseason for the Kansas City Chiefs, but hasn't been dependable in the regular season over the years. And then we've also seen, Seahawks fans know this too, the multiple legal issues that he's had, dating back all the way to his days at Michigan. And so for me, what I look at, if you're going to bring in Frank Clark, it's got to be a situation where you're just not paying him a ton of money. I'm not investing a lot in Frank Clark. Not exactly sure what his market value is going to hold at this point in his career, but just with those things that we mentioned, with him playing at an inconsistent level and having multiple legal issues over the years, I'd be more than happy to talk about this possibility and be open to bringing Frank Clark back, but I have my doubts, some skepticism when it comes to the money aspect when you factor in those things that we mentioned. The numbers for Frank Clark, his time in KC. You can see that his best year, you go back to 2019, when he had 8 sacks, 13 tackles for loss, 4 pass breakups. This past season included 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, and 39 total tackles in the 15 games played. Pro Football Focus is not the biggest fan of Frank Clark, with a tackling grade of 35.2, overall grade of 67.2, run D grade of 61.2, and a pass rush grade of 62.9. The depth chart for the Seahawks, you can see there where things stack up right now. Frank Clark would be an upgrade. No one, I think, is disputing that. But as far as the money aspect goes, think about this. We're still waiting on the final terms of this Geno deal and what's going to count against the cap and all that. The Seahawks, before the deal went down for Geno, had $24 million in cap space. Okay? Obviously, Geno's going to take a significant chunk of that. We're still trying to figure out what exactly is going to count for this year as opposed to next year. We know he's going to make $35 million next year, but as far as how that's divided up, what goes where, that still remains to be seen. So with that, I don't know if you have the money to afford a player like Frank Clark, quite frankly, and then you still got to pay your rookies that you're about to draft as well. So who is a player the Seahawks should sign in NFL free agency, whether it's Frank Clark or someone else that is out there? Today is the franchise tag deadline, and then after we get past the franchise tag deadline, we will know all of the plethora of free agents out there. Who comes to mind that you'd like to see in the Seahawks uniform next year? Let us know in the comments section below. Let's talk draft now. Todd McShay of ESPN has his newest mock draft out, and his 2 picks for Seattle are pretty interesting. And I'll tell you this ahead of time. Todd doesn't have any trades for the Seahawks. Remember when we talked about the Mel Kiper mock draft that came out a week or 2 ago? He had the Seahawks involved in trading back at 9 and getting Anthony Richardson. Well, McShay has the Seahawks staying at 5 and 20. And with the 5 pick going with Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech. And, I don't know what the betting odds are at the top of my head, but if I were to guess right now, just based on everything that we know at this point in time, and what all the so-called experts are saying, that the most likely scenario, if the Seahawks stay at 5, Tyree Wilson is probably that guy for Seattle where things stand right now. Here's what McShay had to say about the idea of Wilson going to the Seahawks. Wilson didn't work out in Indy. That's referring to the combine. We haven't seen him on the field since November. He is recovering from a broken bone in his foot. But the 6'6", 271-pounder has a 35 5/8-inch length and overwhelming power. The Seahawks have to clean up their pass rush, and Wilson would be a great start there after he posted back-to-back seasons of 7 sacks. Seattle had 45 tackles in 2022, tied for 7th, but its 33.5% pass rush win rate and 28.9% pressure rate were both bottom-tier results. And now Poona Ford is a free agent. Uchenna Nwosu is entering the final year of his deal. Time to get serious about the defensive line, and Seattle has a second first rounder at number 20 to continue on that path. So that's what McShay had to say about Wilson with that selection at 5. Now let's move ahead to the 20th pick. McShay projects the Seahawks to go with a pass rusher again, this time Myles Murphy, the defensive end out of Clemson. And I got to tell you, we have seen, remember a couple weeks ago, there were some mock drafts out there that projected the Seahawks taking Murphy all the way at 5. So if he's around at 20, you're looking at potentially a top 5 caliber talent available at 20. I think you're feeling pretty good about that, honestly. I like what I've seen from McShay on this. Here's more from McShay on the idea of bringing Murphy to Seattle on that 20th pick. Yes, the Seahawks already landed Texas Tech's Wilson earlier in this mock, but adding to the defensive line is the biggest team need now that Geno Smith has headed back to Seattle's QB1. GM John Schneider has to get that unit right, and this could end up being a steal. Murphy has power, burst, and bend off the edge, and he comes with some versatility. Over the past 2 seasons, Murphy had 14 sacks, 63 pressures, and 23 tackles for loss. So why the slide? There were a few too many times late in the season that he disappeared. So that's why McShay has him falling all the way to 20. I'll say this. I know that it jumps off the page of 2 pass rushers for the Seahawks with these 2 first-round picks, but I'll tell you this much. I want to be surprised if the Seahawks were to pull that off and to go this route of going with multiple pass rushers there with these first couple picks. And the reason why, I think, is not only just need, obviously, but we've seen precedent for this before. You go back to last year's draft. Remember? They drafted 2 corners. They drafted Tariq Woolen and Kobe Bryant, right? We saw them draft guys at multiple positions. Remember, offensive tackle, the Seahawks spent 2 picks in the first 3 rounds on last year with Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas. So with that said, whether it's pass rusher or it's some of these other positions, just because the Seahawks find a guy they like, it doesn't mean that they're completely against getting another guy as well that is a similar asset of some sorts here. So, yeah, I could see the Seahawks very well going this route as far as that's concerned. How would you grade Todd McShay's Seahawks mock draft? Did not take a quarterback, didn't take a skill position player, stuck with the needs on defense for these 2 picks, and no trades either. What do you think? Grade his mock draft, A, B, C, D, or F, and let us know in the comments section below. You can interact with me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Tyler Jones Live, talking about your Seattle Seahawks there. I'll see you next time right here on Seahawks Today.